Page 51, Tractate Yoma, Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the page. ולרב ששת הדמוקים לה בעילו של אהרון לוקמה בפסח, דדוחה את השבת ואת הטומאה, ועושה תמורה דקורבן יחידו. We explained in the previous shiur that we have to differentiate between two. One is the category of the Paschal lamb, and the other one is the one we used in the previous term for the offering of the Kohen Gadol. The previous Braita, it's clear that dealing with a Paschal lamb, the Torah used that term, Zevach. Zevach applied to Pesach. The other one that applied to the Kohen Gadol, Power Kohen Gadol, the ox that's used for the Kohen Gadol or burnt offering, the Torah did not use the word Zevach at all. So here we said that Rav Sheshet followed, again, this session is followed the previous one. Rav Sheshet followed Rav Yehuda that said, and that's basically based on Mishnah in Psachim 91, that that's applied to the ram that Aharon Kohen used. So it's better to put it in Pesach, but we have in the previous daf we explained that there are two categories. One, we say that something that override Shabbat and Tum'ah, which is Korban Tzibur, something that is a public offering, and we explains that Korban Yachid, individual offering, does not override Shabbat and ritual impurity. So they said, Kasavar, Ein shochatin et ha-pesach al ha-yachid. We need to have at least two people in order to fulfill the mitzvah to slaughter the Paschal lamb. So he said, V'nukme v'pesach sheni. Here we have a little problem. Hamakor, the source of לא תוכל לזבוח את הפסח באחת שעריך, this pasuk, the Torah said specifically for the second chance of Pesach. And if we're dealing here in this sugya, this speaks about regular Pesach. So many of the Rishonim asked us question that since the makor, the source of that, is Pesach Sheni, how come we're using him here while we're speaking about Pesach Rishon? But anyway, the Gemarrah asks, how about if Rav Sheshet hold his Braita about dealing with Pesach Sheni? For those who are not so familiar, the Torah tells us in Parashat Baalotcha, for people who are ritually impure or for some reason cannot bring the Paschal offering on time, there is another chance to do it the following month, 14th day of month of Iyar, and they can bring the second Pesach. Example is ritual impurity, we said, or someone who's far distance, etc. So we said, even according to the Tanah that hold that we don't slaughter the Pesach for individual, that applies specifically for the first chance, the first Pesach. But if it's a second one, he agrees that you can have individual that slaughter the Pesach. So you go back to the question that Pesach Sheni Oseh Tmura, the same as all the other private offering. So the Gemarrah said, we speaks about circumstance that the offering of Zevach overrides Shabbat and Tumah, and the Pesach Sheni Midachi Tumah. It's a disputation between the Tanaim in Pesach Sheni if it's overridden. So therefore, you have to say that that's specifically dealing with Eilo Shel Aaron, which is the realm of Aharon, the high priest, and not the other. So now we go back to the Mishnah in Tractate Tmura, page 50, that we brought as an example from Rabbi Meir that said that here you have an example of a peace offering that was brought as a an offering as individual, and it's override Shabbat and Tumah, unlike the way we said it earlier. אמר לרב הונא ברי דרבי יהושע לרבא, ותנא מה ישנה פסח דקרא לקורבן יחיד ומה ישנה חגיגה דקרא לקורבן ציבור. How you differentiate between Paschal land that is considering as an individual offering versus the Chagiga, the peace offering, that we call it a public offering. Because if you say that the peace offering the same as Pesach, it's not brought by the entire community, but by each individual. Pesach meaning it's in public. So the Torah tells us that each and everyone needs to go to Yerushalayim and needs to be there 3 times a year. And it's clear that the offering has to be, which called Berov Am. Many people needs to be there. Everyone go to Yerushalayim, make Aliyah Laregel, bringing the offering to Beit HaMikdash, etc. So here, since that offering need knufiya, meaning many people, here the same thing. At Paschal offering, it's also in many people attended, and all the nation of Israel need to bring the Paschal lamb as one, and therefore this offering of Chagiga is considering as a public offering. And Siach Yitzchak elaborated on that, and he said that it's basically total matching between the two, and is the issue of differentiation between the Chagiga and Pesach offering. So he said, Irka Pesach Sheini, Rabbi responded, said, let's face it, when you're dealing with 14 of Iyar, which is a month later, so you don't have the decorum of many. You have just individual, someone who's a leper, someone who's ritually impure, at the distance, etc. So only those individual. So when the Tana used the term of Korban Yachid, of individual offering, he meant to say Pesach Sheni. That's the way Rabbeinu Eliakim understanding this Gemarrah. So the Gemarrah asked, Omar le Rav Huna ben Rav Yeshua asked Rabbi, Imken, if you tell me that the Braita speaks about Pesach Sheni, 14 of Iyar, Yehed Oched HaShabbat v'Tumah, you may have a Havamina to say that Pesach Sheni override Shabbat and Tumah, ritual impurity. Why? Because Rabbi said that Pesach override Shabbat and ritual impurity, and according to Rabbi it meant to say the second Pesach. So, and what's the halakha? The halakha is that he is override Shabbat and not ritual impurity. So they said, Amar le Rav Huna ben Rav Yeshua response said, Ain. When Rabbi Meir said that the Pesach override Shabbat and Tumah, he meant to say second Pesach, Keman de'ame amar dachi. That he said that according to that Tana, which is not the majority, he said it's even override, Pesach Sheni even override the ritual impurity. So the whole question of Rabbi Meir on Tana Kama, it's based on this shita, on this thingy. And therefore, it's not necessarily correct to say that Rabbi Meir hold that second Pesach override ritual impurity, and it's only maybe just a point of challenge early in early stage of the discussion. The Tanya. Now we bring the disputation between Tanaim in regards to second Pesach. So the Braita said Pesach Sheni Dochet HaShabbat. We have the idea, the notion that 14 month of Iyar, which considering the Pesach Sheni, is override Shabbat because it has a permanent time, which is, as we said, 14 day of month of Iyar. So, meaning, if it happens that the 14th day of month of Iyar occurred on Shabbat, so the Torah said that they need to do it Bemoado. Bemoado meaning, the Torah said in Bamidbar, book of Numbers, chapter 9, the same way as Pesach Rishon, we did it on the exact time. The Pesach Sheni, we do the same thing. It has to be on 14th day of month of Iyar. However, V'no dochet hatumah. As much as we say that it's override Shabbat, if it's occurred the 14th day of month of Iyar, the Pesach Sheni, that's not applied to the ritual impurities, meaning that if someone has the obligation to bring a second Paschal lamb, meaning the second time Pesach Sheni, he needs to do it on 14th of Iyar. and even he is ritually impure, we said as follows. Pesach Rishon, you can have b'diavad, after the fact, some people that are ritually impure and can bring the Pesach offering. However, if you have this Pesach Sheni, under no circumstance we allow to do it. So in other words, someone would not have the chance to bring the first Pesach on time, and the 14th day of month of Iyar, he cannot bring it while he is in a state of purity. For example, if he is ritually impure, or if it's only Kohanim that ritually impure, so therefore we do not have the second Pesach at that year. So they said, my Tanakama, why Tanakama hold that Pesach Sheni did not override the ritual impurity? Amar Lach, he said, Mipnei Tum'ah dechito ve'yaseh betum'ah. The whole reason that we postponed it from the first Pesach, it's because it was ritually impure. So now you bring it a second one, it's ritually impure, so what do you gain out of that? It makes no sense. So it's totally rejected. And they said, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Lach. So Rabbi Yehuda responded to that and he said, Amar Kra, the Torah said in regard to Pesach Sheni, book of Bamidbar, chapter 9, Kechol Chukat HaPesach yasu to all the law, according to all the law of ordinances of the first Pesach, you shall do it. So what we derive? The same ways you bring the first Pesach on time, even you are in a state of ritual impurity. These are the same, the second one. Va'afilu betumah, and to bring it even in a state of ritual impure. So in that sense, the second Pesach, Tosfot said, is equivalent to the first one. It's basically the same. HaTorah hechzira alav. The Torah imposed upon someone who was ritually impure the first Pesach to go back and la'asoto betahara, that he will do it in a ritually purity, the second Pesach, lo zacha, yasenu betumah. So in other words, lechatchila it's better not to do it, but b'diavad, you can do it. So now we return to question of Rabbi Elazar. We're now page Nun Aleph, Amud Bet, 51b. Rabbi Elazar asked if all the rest of the Kohanim, they are considering as partners with the Kohen Gadol in that ox, and therefore it's considered parashutafim, and he will not be a teruma, or you say that he will not atone by this par, but only by these atonements of the high priest, this part is considering one individual part, and the setemura. So they said, v'teipukli, that's based on the Gemarrah that we discussed, if you remember, yesterday, Nun Amud Bet, 50b. So the Gemarrah asked, v'teipukli, da'asher lo amar achmana. So you may say that Rabbi Eliezer hold that this part for sure it's not a partnership on. Why? Because the Torah said in regard to this offering in the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, et parachatat asher lo, the bull offering of his. So what derives? Shelo hu mevi. He needs to bring by himself and not atone agavocha by the atonements of the Kohen Gadol. The Tanya, the Torah said, et parachatat asher lo. That's the pasuk. Mishelo hu mevin velo mishel tzibur. He cannot use the money of public. He needs to have his own. יכול הניש להביא משל ציבור, משל ציבור מתכפרים בו. You may say that since the ox atoned for the Kohen Gadol and the brethren, and therefore the rest of the public is offered by the goat offering for the public, so it's like separate seirim. So they said, אבל יביא משל אחיו הכהנים, שהרי אחיו הכהנים מתכבדים בו. He can bring the ox from the money of all his brethren, the Kohanim, because they are atoned for him. Talmud lomar asher lo. So it has to be for his ownership, his property. יכול להביא, ואם הביא כשר, תלמוד לומר אשר לא שנה כתוב לעכב. The Torah repeats again, to emphasize that the ox needs to be his. In other words, if he's not used his own power, this offering is disqualified, it's not valid. So since the bride tells us that this ox comes specifically from the money of the Kohen Gadol, so why Rabbi Elazar have an issue, a suffix, in regard to his brethren, the Kohanim, if they are considering as partners with this ox, to atone for that or not? Because obviously we're saying that this is atonement for the Kohen Gadol, not to all the others. So they said, Uletamich. So according to the way you understand that you cannot hold that there are other partners with the Kohen Gadol in his sin offering. Chava Kohanim ilav dekanu begavi. If they don't have a kinyan, if they're not part, let's give an example, the Chazon Ish use, and they have others. You have several mitzvahs, you have several mitzvot that you use partners. In other words, they use more than one person, that several people join together. Trace the situation Chanukah. You travel and you go to someone else and you mishtatev bepruta, you give the owner something, Shabbat, candles, etc. You use a certain money and everyone join together. So in that sense, by joining even a shve pruta, even a small amount of money, the moment you join in, you're part of the team, part of the group, even that is just a token. Here you tell me that this one has nothing to do with Kohen Gadol. So if the Kohen Gadol, if this fellow did not participate with that expense, with that offering, in the sense of paying something, how you tell me that he is also atoned with the Kohen Gadol's offering for everyone else? So they said, Ela, you have to admit, Shane Beigaza de Aaron, de Afker Achmana, Gabe Chava Kohanim, Hacha Gabe Moaname, Shane Beigaza de Aaron, Gabe Gabe Chava Kohanim. So the treasure of the Aharon, the first high priest, which means the ownership of the Kohen Gadol on this particular animal, is different for all the other expenses. Meaning, over the others, so other brethren of the Kohanim, they have kinyan agav. By the way, they atone for the Kohen Gadol. So even he purchased all of his money, but still the ownership, it's in a sense his, but they are partners. He can derive from that. But the others, that the Torah make the ox ownerless in regards to all the other brethren, so they merited to atonement that it's equivalent to the atonements of the Kohen Gadol. So since all the others eventually have part of that ox, even they don't purchase it from his money, from their money, it's still a possibility that they are partners with the Kohen Gadol, and therefore Elazar, it's correct for him to have this dilemma, this predicament. If this ox is partner of this, they are all partners of this offering, that means that all the other Kohanim are part of that offering, and therefore he knows said Mura, or the other way around, and it's only kaparat agav, and therefore this part is considered individual and will make it as a tmura. But the Bach here have the girsa. So according to Bach, he said, "V'yesh lo mekabel b'kiviyuta." We're about to begin the Mishnah, and the Mishnah dealing with the process, the Kohen Gadol, while he intends to go to the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, he is in the part of the courtyard, and he walk to that process, which means there is a part of the temple of Beit HaMikdash that it's cover with a roof. It's called mekure. And that part is in the west part of the courtyard. We follow the Torah. The Torah called it Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. We explained several times that there are three stages. One is the sanctuary. Then the Kohen walk from the sanctuary in the east part, from the big hall to the main sanctuary, and from the main sanctuary he goes further from the east to the west to the part of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. Basically we follow here Rashi, who explain how the Kohen Gadol does that in order to bring the incense on Yom Kippurim. Hayam mehalech bahechal. The Kohen Gadol walk in the sanctuary. He carries the pot with the coal and the incense. Ad shemegia lebein shtei aparochot, until he reach a point that it's between the two curtains. Later we're going to learn the difference between the first Beit HaMikdash and the second Beit HaMikdash. But in the second one, it was two. Those of you who have Gemarrah with pictures, you will see pictures or skits how it was. But anyway, Hamavdilot ben Kodesh leKodesh HaKodashim. It was one parochet, one curtain that applied to the section of the Kodesh, the sanctuary, and then another one leading to Kodesh HaKodashim. Now, between the two, it was a distance of 1 cubit. Now, we have to remember that there is a huge difference between the first Beit HaMikdash, the first temple, and the second one. During the era of the second temple, it was not a wall made by regular materials like stone wall, but it was instead two curtains. One was more eternal than the others. Now, the issue with that, in very general, it was the issue of, for the best term, security. The kir tomech, the wall that supported the wall, in between them, they are not sure where exactly it's located. And since it was a question and uncertainty, they developed this idea with two curtains and a distance between the two of cubit, so in that way they cover that issue. Rabbi Yossi אומר, לא הייתה שם אלא פרוכת אחת בלבד, שנאמר והבדילה פרוכת לכם בין הקודש ובין קודש הקודשים. Rabbi Yossi said that between the two sections, the Kodesh, the Heichal, the sanctuary, and Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, it was only one section of large curtain, and he proved that point from the original one, which was built in the era of the tabernacle. The Torah said in the book of Shmot, Exodus chapter 26, that this curtain should be divided in the tent of meeting and the ancient part of the tabernacle between the holy and the Holy of Holies. Since the Torah used a singular, he holds that it has to be only one single wall in between them. Now, we have to remember that that part wasn't a question during the first Beit HaMikdash. It turned to be a big challenge, as we said, during the second one. So the Gemarrah said, Shapir ka'amarnu Rabbi Yossi l'Rabbanan. How did the sages respond to Rabbi Yossi, since he proved by a clear text in the Torah that speaks in a singular way over this curtain, that the curtain has to be one curtain, one divided part, a partition between Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim. Respond, the Gemarrah said, V'Rabbanan amri lach, הנמילי במשכן, אבל במקדש שני, כיוון דלא הווי, אמת רקסין. So they said this applied only in the era of the tabernacle. So over there it was only one curtain. But during the era of the second temple, it was a wall in the size of 1 cubit, that differentiate between the holy and the Holy of Holies. And traksin is from the word trak-sin, which Rashi said it's from the point of outside. So again, the Chazon Ish elaborate on this Tosfot here. We have to differentiate between two sections of sanctity. One hold lower than the others. And since this is one wall between that, you meant to say literally that one side of the wall carries more sanctity than the other. In other words, the side of the wall that faced the Holy of Holies carry highest level of sanctity because it's part of that section. So now you see that the Milema, or the Seder B'mikdash Rishon Hu Dehavai, which means it was during the first temple, this type of wall, that the Kohen Gadol passed to that section when he entered the domain of Holy of Holies in Yom Kippur. Ve'istapkalu leRabanan bikdushatei. The sages, as we explained, have a serious issue during the era of the second temple if that particular small section of 1 cubit carries the sanctity as it used to at the first one. In other words, the designation of the exact location and the size carries the problem that forced them to go by the idea of two separate partitions and the notion of having 1 cubit between them. Why? Because they said, Ikil fanim, Ikil achutz, v'avul shtei faruchot. Since we do not know for the sanctity of that petition, we don't know if it's carrying the sanctity of the internal part facing the wall to the Holy of Holies or not. Since it was a predicament, they come up with the idea of section of 1 cubit in between them, and that build the notion of 2 separate partitions. Tanu Abanan, since we speak about the path that the Kohen Gadol goes on Yom Kippurim in order to enter the Holy of Holies, Tanu Rabinan, the sages teach us in a Braita, Ben HaMizbeach LaMnorah. So in the sanctuary it was 3 vessels, 3 separate area. One, it was intern altar, and then it was the menorah, the candle burn, and the table. The table stood in the north part of the sanctuary. It was 2.5 cubits from the northern wall. The menorah, the candle burn, was in the south part of the sanctuary, across from the table, and it was 2.5 cubits from the southern wall, and the inner altar was in the equal distance from these 2 walls, and it was a little bit to the east, so it was not any separation between the table and the menorah. That's, if you remember, we studied it on page 33b. So they said the Kohen Tanu Abanan ben HaMizbeach LaMnorah haya me'alech divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So he said that the Kohen Gadol walked through the sanctuary in order to enter the Holy of Holies. So in other words, when he entered from the eastern part to the sanctuary, he walked to the south side of the sanctuary between the altar and the menorah until he reached the point of the curtain that was in the western part of the sanctuary. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And again, I wish to have here a clearer picture, but you see it in your Gemarrot, especially the Israelis ones. You see in Ivrit, the Gemarrah that carries those pictures. Rabbi Meir hold that the path of the Kohen Gadol was different. He said that he goes from the northern part. He said, Ben Shulchan LaMizbeach, between the table and the inner altar. Ve'yesh omrim, and there are those who say, Ben Shulchan LaKotel, between the table and the northern wall. So, basically, this opinion holds the same as Rabbi Meir, that the Kohen Gadol goes to the northern part of the sanctuary, but Rabbi Meir hold that he walk between the table and the altar. And according to that opinion, which said V'yesh Omrim, we don't know which one is, when the Kohen Gadol goes a little northern to that, close to the northern part of that wall. Later, the Gemarrah elaborate on each and every opinion. Ma yesh omrim. Now, since we said we do not know yet who is the third point of view, Amar Rav Chizda Rabbi Yossi, the Amar Pitcha Tzafon Kai. It's basically opinion of Rabbi Yossi that said that the entrance to that section comes from the northern part of the sanctuary. So in other words, each and every Tanai hold that the entrance to the Holy of Holies was from the northern part. Why? Because in general the northern carries more importance than the southern part. But according to the sages, it was two separate partitions, curtain, and they are not opening to that side only from when he enter from that section, in other words, from the northern part. So since he walked and the entrance was from the southern part, so they said that he has to go the other way around, come from the southern, and then he go by the space between the two curtains, and then he entered the Holy of Holies. According to Rabbi Yossi, who said that it was only one curtain, and the opening was toward the northern part, so therefore he goes the other way around, that go from the northern part of the sanctuary. Usually the Gemarrah says in Horayot 13 that when you use the Yesh Omrim, we apply to the opinion of Rabbi Natan, but here you may say the Ritva hold that Rabbi Natan hold the same as Rabbi Yossi. Anyway, as we explained, Rabbi Yehuda said that go by the southern part. So in other words, the opening in that parochet, in that curtain, that Kohen Gadol enter from the sanctuary leading to the Holy of Holies, it was in the southern part of the sanctuary, and therefore he goes by the southern part and enter. So he hold the same as the Tana and the Mishnah. It was two separate curtains that separate between the Holy and the Holy of Holies. And since the first curtain that he hits is in the southern part, so therefore he hold that he has to be from the southern part. ורבי מאיר כמן סביר עלי. So whom Rabbi Meir hold? Ik Rabbi Yehuda סביר עלי, that he said that he's from the southern part. Neul כרבי יהודה. So you have to say that Kohen Gadol entered to that part from the sanctuary to the Holy of Holies from the southern part. In the same way as Rabbi Yehuda said that he walked between the altar and the menorah. Ik Rabbi Yossi סביר עלי. Rabbi Yossi said, remember, he said from the northern part, Neol כרבי Yossi. So you have to say that the Kohen Gadol goes from the northern part of the sanctuary. As Rabbi Yossi said that he walked between the table and the wall. So what's the reason of Rabbi Meir that said that the Kohen Gadol walked between the table and the altar? So the Gemarrah said, Le'olam ki Rabbi Yossi svir alei, that the entrance of the Holy of Holies was in the northern part. Ve'amar lecha shulchanot, those tables that King Solomon made during the era of the first temple, and he placed them in a sanctuary close to the table that we believe inherited from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu from Moses. So it was set up in a way, in the order of 5 and 5 tables. Tzafon vedarom munachim, they are set up from northern part to the southern part. Each length of 5 tables was 10 cubits. So it means when they place them from northern part to the southern part, they fill up all the northern part of the sanctuary, because remember we said it many times that the length of the sanctuary was 20 cubits. Umafsek alei shulchan, those tables separated before the Kohen Gadol, velo mitayele. So if that's the case, they have so many tables, he cannot walk to the Holy of Holies between the northern part of the sanctuary to the table. So in general, that's one school of thought. Rashi here explain how he can walk between the table and the altar, and elaborate on that. The Maharsha and others said that he walked between that wall and the sanctuary. So they said that the way that they set up those tables was from eastern part to the western part. The Chazon Ish have a big mahalach on that, but we're running out of time, so just let's wrap it up. V'baitema, it's another option. Leolam, may you say that Rabbi Meir hold that the tables that Shlomo set up was mizrach lema'arav, was between east part to the western part, munachim. So it means the separate was only in the size of 3 tables, which means that the 2 lines and the tables that Moshe Rabbeinu made, and the Kohen Gadol can walk to the domain of the Holy of Holies toward the northern part of the sanctuary, between the table and the wall. Umishum Shechina lavorach ara. That's so beautiful. They said, since we believe that the Holy of Holies, the place the divine providence dwell, that is the most highest site in the world, it's very incongruous and very inappropriate for the Kohen Gadol, with all due respect, to walk to the entrance of the Holy of Holies. Because if he goes straight forward there, he sees the internal part of the Holy of Holies, and it's inappropriate for the divine providence that he sees it from outside. So therefore, you have to say that he walked between the wall to the table, across from the entrance of the Holy of Holies, and that impossible. So you have to say that he walked between the table and the altar. So in other words, in that sense, Rabbi Meir hold the same as Rabbi Yossi, that it was only one parochet, one curtain between the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies, and it was made toward the northern part. So, and as we explained in the Gemara, and Rashi said, since it's inappropriate for him to see inside, that's the reason he goes that direction. Other mefarshim, like Rabbeinu Hananel, Siach Yitzchak, etc., they say that it's also a manner, the proper manners. Meaning, I know some people, before they walk to someone else's home, even sometimes I know people, like children to their parents, husband, wife, etc., they knock the door. It's like they give 3 seconds or 5 seconds, a little permission before they enter. Hashem sfatai tiftach ufi yagid tiratecha. We ask a special permission before we start the Amidah. So in that sense, Rabbeinu Hananel explains, Siach Yitzchak and other mefarshim, that we need to go to that separation, that path, in order for the Kohen Gadol to pose and gets this type of permission before he enters. It's just inappropriate or even a little bit disrespectful for him to just walk in the Holy of Holies just like that. Rabbi Yossi. So according to Rabbi Yossi, that he said he walked directly to the Holy of Holies, close to the northern wall. How he goes there? So it's not a problem. He said, Amar lecha Chavivin Israel shlo yitzlicha lakatuv leshaliach. So it means that they said in the Book of Kings, chapter 8, that I just paraphrase the word, that Hashem accepted and loved all the prayers all the times. They said, כל תפילה, כל תחינה אשר תהיה לכל האדם בכל עמך ישראל אשר ידעו איש נגע לבבו ופרס כפיו אל הבית הזה ואתה תשמע מן השמיים מכון שבטך. So since he carries such a huge mission and he is a representative of all the nations, so and he carries the shaliach, the emissary. Rabbeinu Hananel said he carried these golden rings that everyone here that he is entering. So therefore, it's proper for him to walk even straight. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda neol ben menorah lakotel. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that it was opening with the curtain, outer curtain from the southern part. So they said, why he need to walk between the menorah and the altar? He can walk close to the southern part of the sanctuary between him and the menorah. So they said, if the Kohen Gadol walked that way, meshacharei manei. So since the menorah, the candle burn, carries the flame and it's stick to the body, right? If you come close to that, especially in the ancient way, so it carries smoke that can hit the clothing. So also, if another option is if you touch the wall, the southern wall that carries. If you put menorah, those who light candles have to be careful not to be close to the wall, because if it's close to the wall, over the time you see the wall turn dark. So in that sense, if you walk there, clothing will hit that part. And we say that the big day kehuna, the clothing of the Kohen, has to be super clean and neat and nice and representative. So then, therefore, he said that he need to walk between the menorah and mizbeach in a distance from the wall, so his garment will be lechavod v'letiferet, will be kiyim. And the Gemarrah in Zvachim, page 12, said that that's even can make the service disqualified if his garment is not total clean and neat. That's also Rambam, Hilchot Klei HaMikdash, chapter 8, Seif Dalet. He said it clearly that the Kohen Gadol has to be extra careful. His garment should not carry any dirt.
ציר מי שלא יוכלני